I'm not seeing
Oh,
you.
sorry, Kevin. Yeah, we're live here. We're having another one of these days where
Yeah.
some things are happy and some things are not. Let me.
Yeah.
We're going to be starting our live show on Patreon in just a short while here. I am trying to get some things together. Could you toggle your camera, please, Kevin?
Yeah. How's any good there? Any improvement?
Yes, we've got you. Okay.
All righty. Great.
So
We're back.
now the only thing we need to do is we've got a little problem happening here. So, Kevin, we have been talking a lot for the past several days and weeks about the ongoing coup that is happening, the Ukraine Gate thing.
Yeah.
The sad occurrence that's taking place right now is that I do not have your video on here, and I know why, but overcoming the problem is tricky. So, Kevin, can you tell us what we're going to be discussing tonight?
Sure, Jason. I'd be glad to. We're going to be talking about Ukraine and getting into detail, a lot of detail, and the personalities involved. The Russia collusion hoax, which, of course, as we all know, is a soft coup. We now know that that actually began in Ukraine. The entire fabrication of that operation started in Ukraine with the same players, John Brennan, Hillary Clinton, the Department of State, Victoria Nuland, and all of the others that were involved in the Russia collusion hoax. Turns out they were in Ukraine and were working with George Soros connected organizations. Our Department of State literally was working with George Soros and his anti-U.S. sovereignty organizations in Ukraine. And they actually worked with Soros to come up with the false information on Donald Trump, which eventually led to the Steele dossier. That all started in Ukraine. And as it's unfolding with these kangaroo court impeachment hearings, we're finding out the depth of the level of corruption in Ukraine. And the point is, and we'll go through this in great detail during the program. The point is these impeachment hearings are essentially soft coup 2.0. Because now that this whistleblower so-called has come out, and we've done a program on that. That's not a whistleblower, Eric Ciaramella. Did I say that out loud?
Wait a minute. Hang on a second. We just got live streaming back
We did.
on crowdsourcethetruth.com. We don't want to lose it. I don't know if YouTube is a platform that throws you off for doing that, but Kevin, it's really a strange thing to be in the United States of America in 2019 and not be able to say a person's name. Literally, this character's name is verboten. It is a forbidden word. And, Kevin, talk to us for a moment if you could, because, we're going to be getting into the details of your presentation tonight when we begin our sponsor-only show on patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And before I ask you this, I do also want to let everybody know that if they haven't seen us on YouTube in a while, you and I have both, Kevin, started Subscribe Star pages as well. Some people aren't too happy with the technical features of Patreon. Some people aren't too happy with the political stance of Patreon. So we wanted to give our sponsors a number of ways that they could support you, Kevin, and Crowdsource the Truth. So if people go to subscribestar.com/Kevin-Ship, and Ship, of course, is spelled with 2 P's, they can get to the videos that way as well. So sorry to interrupt, but please give us a little overview of what we're going to be discussing tonight.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing that these impeachment hearings are nothing more than soft coup 2.0. The same parties that were involved in the Russia collusion hoax are the parties that are involved in this so-called impeachment. And it's worth noting, this is an impeachment inquiry, quote unquote. This is not an impeachment hearing. So this is a show trial, essentially, and it's not even a legal impeachment hearing per se. That would have to go before a vote in the Congress and then eventually to the Senate. So this is just a show trial. It's a kangaroo court, as we'll talk about later. But the point is this started in Ukraine, all of this. The Russia collusion hoax with John Brennan and Hillary Clinton and Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier and the FBI spying on Donald Trump, that all began in Ukraine. And we'll talk about that in detail, how, when that began, and the parties that were involved. So what we're seeing here with this impeachment hearing, the reason that they are so desperate, Jason, to make this show impeachment hearing is now that they trotted out this so-called whistleblower whose name rhymes with citronella. They've kind of they've tied all four of the cat's legs together, because citronella, as you know, is no whistleblower as far as I'm concerned. Right. He is an operational plant, and he was planted there by none other than the central coup figure John Brennan, who we think and we hope very soon may be indicted. But this all started in Ukraine, and the salient point here, Jason, is that the impeachment hearings are an attempt to cover up what happened in Ukraine, because it is serious. It is deep, it is criminal, and most startlingly of all is that it's all connected into the puppet master, the global puppet master, George Soros. And it turns out that our own Department of State, Victoria Nuland and Marie Yakonovich, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, which I'm probably not, Nuland and the Department of State had an official relationship with George Soros, his Open Society Foundations, and the Anti-Corruption Center. They were actually working with George Soros to dig up dirt and start this campaign against Donald Trump, which wound up being the Christopher Steele dossier. Soros was connected, in charge, and our Department of State, which is probably the most shocking part, at least in my mind of this, our Department of State was working with George Soros in some detail of a very close relationship. And we have to remember that George Soros, his stated goal is the elimination of U.S. sovereignty and, of course, the removal of Donald Trump as president of the United States. And our Department of State had a working relation with him in Ukraine.
Now, let me ask you this, Kevin. Sorry to interrupt you, but when you were in the CIA, obviously the CIA and the Department of State have a long history together. We've heard quite a bit about how the CIA installation in Benghazi had Ambassador Stevens there, so that was a Department of State thing that was being kind of protected by the CIA or overseen by the CIA. What is the official relationship between the Department of State and the CIA?
Well, I've worked for both, and I've managed programs for both. The official relation, the Department of State is supposed to be the diplomatic, non-intelligence arm of our government. We found out that is, in an unconstitutional, illegal fashion, a lie. We saw with the Department of State and Hillary Clinton running guns into Benghazi. The Department of State was actually running weapons and heavy weapons, which wound up in the hands of ISIS. They're not supposed to be doing that. I can tell you, when I was doing investigations internally in the CIA, I used to go and brief large groups, large audiences in the Department of State, and I routinely had State Department employees come up to me and beg me to open an investigation in the Department of State. One lady said, "Look, my boss here at Department of State has been turning over classified information to the Russians, and no one will listen to me about it." And I said, give me his name, give me who he is." And she did. She said, you got to do something about this." I took that back to the CIA, turned it in, and never heard another thing about it. The Department of State is riddled with espionage, and of course I've worked with them overseas too, and they are so loose with foreign intelligence services, it's laughable. So to answer your question, there's supposed to be two different organizations, one for diplomacy and one for intelligence and operations. And unfortunately, we're seeing them cross over now. And Ukraine is a perfect example of that, because Hillary Rodham Clinton, Secretary of State, was right in there with CIA Director John Brennan, who traveled during this period to Ukraine under a false passport. So they've been joined at the hip with a common enemy, and that happened to be the campaign and then the presidency of Donald Trump. It is sedition, and it is sedition at the highest levels of what we now know as the deep state, a bunch of unelected bureaucrats who've had 20 or 30 years in their career and think they know more than the president of the United States. But it gets worse than that, because these people are connected with the anti-American, anti-U.S. government, George Soros.
Wow, Kevin, I have to tell you something. And for people who are watching our preview tonight on YouTube and Periscope and DLive, first of all, I'm very pleased that I have been able to overturn the social engineering attack on Crowdsource the Truth. So we're back with live streaming on Crowdsource the Truth.
Good.
But people can also be watching us right now on the Kevin Shipp YouTube channel. So people who aren't yet subscribed to Kevin's YouTube channel can go over there, and this simulcast YouTube preview is playing right now on Kevin's channel. People can see that my mouse has disappeared, so it's a little difficult to navigate. But this is important because, you know, Kevin, you and I have been doing this show for over a year. Maybe we're coming up on 2 years. I need to check when we started, but it's obviously very sensitive. You cannot share classified information, and that is not what the show is about. You have never done that. I ask you questions hoping to get these juicy pieces of red meat. And what you just dropped right there may be the juiciest, reddest, bloodiest piece we've heard yet. That is unbelievable. So we're going to be continuing this conversation and a deep dive into this really not well understood, at least by most Americans, relationship between the CIA, the Department of State, and this whole concept that it seems that the Department of State, in fact, is the deep state. That's where they're all hanging out.
Oh, yeah. It's the nest of the deep state snakes, the Department of State is. And I have to tell you that at least when I was there, the CIA kind of looked down its nose at Department of State because the Department of State was a leaking intelligence sieve. And so I know when I was there as officers, we all thought the Department of State was a joke. It was it was like a Swiss cheese when it came to intelligence. And of course, we thought our protected detail was better than theirs too. But we'll just set that aside. But no, it's a mess. It's an espionage mess. It's a corruption mess. Now, remember, Jason, I left, let's see, in 2002, managed the Department of State anti-terrorism program, police training until 2011. And so it was bad back then. And I'm speaking regarding what I saw back then, but it was unbelievably corrupt.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that something happened when Hillary Clinton became the Secretary of State, because there seems to have been some sort of a deal made between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama when Obama came in there as president. We're going to explore some more of these facts and details. You know, I recently, Kevin, have been having some conversations with Patrick Berge, and Patrick was an IT specialist with the U.S. Army, who later went on to work for Jim Jones Dynology. And Patrick has told us quite a few things about this company Dynology that I had no idea about. And when we consider that, you know, Jim Jones was Barack Obama's national security advisor, I found this image that I found really kind of curious, because here we see Jim Jones with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Now, as far as I recall, Kevin, who was the vice president under Barack Obama? It wasn't Hillary Clinton, was it?
No, although she probably thought she was, but no, it was some rascal named Joe Biden. But but I think she probably thought she was vice president. Well, no, she thought she was president.
Right, exactly. That's my point, because here we see this sign that says the office of the president-elect, and we see a younger Barack Obama, absent the gray hair that he now has. So this was obviously before he was president, after he won the election, but he's got Hillary standing right next to him, Jim Jones standing right next to her. The two of them have a lot more experience and understanding of how the government works, how the military works, how the State Department works, how intelligence works. Barack Obama might have been being controlled by the two of them. And this is going to be something interesting for us to explore, I think.
And George Soros, that's right.
Exactly.
Yep, no question in my mind about that.
Wow. So we're going to get into some details on that, Kevin, in just about 15 minutes. I hope that some of the people watching us right now will join us over at patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/Kevin-Shipp, or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And if people are just becoming familiar with Kevin now, I don't know where those people have been for the past several years, but Kevin, of course, is a recovering CIA officer. He has written a book called From the Company of Shadows. Why is the mouse not functional? I don't understand what's going on. So in Kevin's book, he details how he discovered a major security flaw, and that was in our embassies. So that does tie to the Department of State. And when Kevin attempted to reveal this flaw, instead of plugging the hole as you would hope our most sophisticated clandestine organization would want to do, they ran Kevin out of town. They sued him, they took away his pension, they ruined his life, they painted his house with poison. Members of his family are still recovering from this. People should purchase the book From the Company of Shadows and read all about Kevin's ordeal. You can get it at fortheloveoffreedom.net. You're going to get a signed copy. It's the perfect gift. We've got the holidays coming up. And you know, Kevin, I think with the election just around the corner, a lot more people are getting dialed into some of the screwy shenanigans that are going on in that drenched, stinky, drippy, disgusting swamp called Washington, D.C. And if there are any skeptics in your family, you can test them out on Thanksgiving and then purchase a bunch of copies of From the Company of Shadows and send them out to the family members who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, at least tell them that there really is a deep state, for goodness sake, you know?
Exactly, exactly. So we'll be back in just a few minutes on Patreon to discuss this, Kevin. I look forward to seeing you there.
Same here, Jason.
All right, thanks very much. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you over at Patreon or Subscribe Star. Don't miss it.